all-around genius. Let's start with a potential NBA blockbuster. We got big news, Tim.
Kobe.
After Utah earlier shut down inquiries about Donovan Mitchell, sources tell Woj rival teams say the Jazz are now showing willingness to listen to possible trade scenarios. The asking price appears to be steep, but in the wake of Utah's recent Rudy Gobert blockbuster deal to Minnesota, the Jazz are no longer simply dismissing calls on Mitchell. So just how good is Donovan Mitchell? Well, we know he's great in the playoffs when it counts the most. Mitchell has the seventh highest points per game in the playoffs in NBA history, just behind, Michael Jordan, Luka Doncic, Allen Iverson, Jerry West, KD, and LeBron. Tim.
That is a wild graphic. I did not know that stat. My eyes kind of popped.
It's not a tiny sample size from Mitchell either, or from Luka. So, Tim, they traded Rudy Gobert. Danny Ainge is there. The writing's on the wall. What does this all mean for Utah?
Well, look, I was here with Brian Windhurst 2 weeks ago when the Rudy Gobert trade happened, broke live on the show, same day as USC and UCLA. It was a crazy, that was the day before. It was a crazy couple of days on this, just in news-wise. And look, we said that day, I was sitting across the table, and when they made that Rudy Gobert trade, the Jazz had two paths to take. One was to do what Danny Ainge did in 2007 and go get ready-made players to play with Donovan Mitchell, like you got Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett to play with Paul Pierce. The other path was to trade Donovan Mitchell and start this thing over.
Yeah.
Because this Jazz team, as you know, is incomplete. They don't have a starting small forward. They don't have a starting center. They have 100 guards.
Conley, Clarkson, and Bogdanovich right now seem to be like their offensive weapons.
Right. Well, you're right. They don't. It's not a complete team. So they had to go one way or the other. And to me, you look at this right now, Donovan Mitchell leaving Utah, this team fully starting over with a young coach in Will Hardy, with a bunch of draft picks, with a team that's got a chance to be at the bottom of the standings and go after Victor Wembanyama, the French star that everybody's looking to get in next year's draft. To me, that is the way this makes sense. And as we both know, a guy like Donovan Mitchell becomes available, a lot of teams are going to be interested.
So that's sort of Utah's perspective. Let's talk about the rest of the league. What does the trade market look like for Mitchell services?
Well, look, there's going to be a lot of teams, Jacoby, that are interested in this guy, right? As we said, he's a big-time scorer in the playoffs. He's a 25-year-old, three-time All-Star. You know, teams are always looking for these lead ball handlers that can be offensive engines late into the playoffs and in the postseason. And, you know, look, we play in New York, or we live in New York. There's two teams that are here that are probably going to be interested in Donovan Mitchell. The team down in Miami that I think is probably going to be interested in Donovan Mitchell, and a lot of other teams are going to be interested in Donovan Mitchell. But certainly, with 3 years left on his deal and with his offensive talent, there's no question this is the kind of guy that is going to generate a ton of interest. And if he is traded, especially since they got 5 first-round picks basically for Rudy Gobert, going to get a lot back for him.
Well, we spent the last couple weeks talking almost exclusively about the Kevin Durant trade.
Oh, really? We talked about the Nets?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
So how does him being available, affect the market for Kevin Durant?
Well, as you know, and as we've talked about a whole bunch the last couple weeks, right, the market for Kevin Durant right now is pretty solid. There isn't a lot going on. You know, we're kind of been in this holding pattern ever since he requested that trade 2 weeks ago today, actually, or tomorrow, I don't know. I've lost track of days. 2 weeks ago, he requested this trade, and ever since then, it's kind of like, all right, when's Kevin going to get traded? And right now, with Summer League wrapping up, the Nets executives heading home in the next day or two, doesn't seem like things are going to happen soon. Now, a guy like Donovan Mitchell becomes available, maybe that starts to shake some things up, right? Because you've had DeAndre Ayton sitting out there waiting to see what's happened with him. We've talked about him a bunch.
Yep.
The Kevin Durant situation sitting there. Now you kind of throw something new in here to say, all right, if the Donovan Mitchell's on the table, do teams start to make offers for him? Does that start to shake things up around the league, seeing other guys potentially move around? It is the kind of thing that could maybe kickstart the Durant conversation, though, on the other hand, it could also just lead to a Donovan Mitchell trade that leaves everything else the same.
Interesting. What team do you think should make the biggest push for Mitchell?
Well, I think you might have a different answer than me, but we are in New York City. Donovan Mitchell is from Westchester County, believe it or not. No one's ever heard that before. His dad works for the Mets. No one's ever heard that before. He was at the Boys and Girls Club in Westchester.
Don't say it.
That's right. There it is.
Don't say it.
There it is. My old paper, the New York Post. Started my career at the New York Post.
See the bottom there? Even if it cost RJ, that's where you lose me.
Well,
that is where you lose me. Like then you have a backcourt that consists of Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson.
Well, listen. Well, a couple things. First of all, I'm not sure this is going to work for the Knicks. As good as Donovan Mitchell is, to your point,
think it's a good idea.
You put him and Jalen Brunson together. That's two very small guards. Bit of a questionable defensive backcourt.
Two great players, but
yes,
seemingly redundant.
That could be a tricky fit. Now, I do think the Knicks can make this trade and keep R.J. Barrett, because if I'm the Utah Jazz, I'm not sure I want to trade for R.J. Barrett and immediately have to pay him when I'm going into this rebuilding phase anyway. And the Knicks have 1,000 draft picks that they've been stockpiling to go get a star player. And oh, by the way, Donovan Mitchell is a CAA guy. There's a ton of CAA guys.
What? I didn't hear that.
With the Knicks, again, not something we've heard before. And they went and hired Utah's former assistant coach, Johnny Bryant, to be there a couple years ago and be on Tom Thibodeau's staff. So you can make arguments for other teams, like a certain team in South Beach, where maybe...
Of course. That's the natural fit. Not just because I don't want him on the Knicks, but it seems like a natural fit. And let me just pitch it to you.
No, for sure.
I like the three-level stars.
Yep.
Right? You've got your Big and Bam, you've got your Wing and Jimmy, and then Kyle Lowry didn't really work out, so then you put Donovan Mitchell in that spot. You've got 3 levels of stars, 3 levels of really productive players, and if it costs you Tyler Hero, you do that so fast.
Well, and that's where I'll stop you, because obviously the Miami Heat would love to have Donovan Mitchell, right? Most teams would, and he'd be an awesome fit playing with Jimmy Butler, playing with Bam Adebayo. I was at the Eastern Conference Finals. You were at those games. The Miami Heat couldn't score in that series, right? They have Donovan Mitchell playing, they would be able to score. Now, the problem is the Heat can't, to me, match what the Knicks can offer. They don't have all their picks. Tyler Hero's a nice player, but again, he's another guy that you have to pay sometime in the next year. Pay a lot of money. And the filler salary around him, they don't have a ton of young prospects that you really like. Like, their packages are kind of limited, especially when you look at the Knicks. So again, Knicks can trade 8 first-round picks. That's the kind of ammo that most teams just can't match up with.
Tim, I'm very concerned about this because I completely agree with you. He's probably going to end up on the Knicks.
Well, I mean, it's the NBA, and we'll see. I mean,
things change so fast.
It wouldn't be the first time that the Knicks thought they were going to be lined up for a star and didn't get him. But it certainly would make a lot of sense. And again, the Knicks have been stockpiling draft picks for years to go get a star player. This is the moment they've been waiting to have. If they get him, you could say that it's not a great fit with Jalen Brunson. You could say that it's not going to work out great. But at the end of the day, the Knicks have been waiting to have a star to build around. He's a 25-year-old lead guard, under contract going forward, who wants to be in New York. Would make a lot of sense.
I'm afraid you're right. Let's talk mega conferences. Last month, USC and UCLA announced.
The NBA CEO Danny Ainge now willing to listen to Donovan Mitchell trade scenarios. That according to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, who says Jazz brass had previously shut down those inquiries on the face of their franchise, but that has changed in the wake of the deal that sent Rudy Gobert to Minnesota. Here's the aforementioned Woj, what Utah's asking price is.
It would take, a significant offer to get Donovan Mitchell out of Utah. They're open to listen to everybody on that roster, but certainly Donovan Mitchell is their most significant player, their most significant asset. 4 years left on a max deal, but the Jazz now are willing to listen to teams as they call and make trade pitches, and that's clearly a change in direction for this organization. Their general manager, Justin Zanuck, said the other day it's not their intention to trade Donovan Mitchell, but clearly now their willingness to listen, certainly, that opens up a lot of avenues around the league as we continue in trade season well into the summer.
All right, here's what Mitchell either brings to a new team or what he's done with the Jazz that would keep them from dealing him. He's averaged better than 20 points per